you eat.
Yeah, that's true.
Before we finish here, just explain like what chiropractors do.
What do chiropractors do? Okay, so we deal with mostly musculoskeletal stuff. So musculo is muscle, skeletal are your bones, and so together, you have your low back pain, anything that causes mechanical pain. And so we work on all of that, especially with what you'll notice is if a joint is not moving as well as it should, you'll have like reduced range of motion, and you'll know that when you have that weird neck pain or that weird back pain, you're like, oh, I can't turn this way. That's usually a combination of your muscles and your bones. And so we work on that. We also focus on the nerves as well. So in your spinal column, you've got a whole spinal cord that's in there. And each part of the vertebrae that goes down your spine, there's nerves that come out. Some of those nerves go to different organs. And so it's super fascinating. I sound so nerdy just talking about it.
I like being nerdy. Yeah, tell me.
I love neurology, so it's so cool. Like if you think about like for example T4, so that's your thoracic vertebrae, which is about your mid-back spine. So T4, the fourth nerve that comes out of that thoracic spine, goes to the gallbladder. And that's usually around your shoulder where that nerve is coming out. And so there have been times where you can kind of correlate a lot of things like, oh, are you having any issues with your gallbladder? And they're like, well, what kind of issues could that be? I'm like, okay, well, there could be issues with your digestion, your stools. There's a lot of stuff that could be going on. And so sometimes patients already know they have gallbladder issues before you even ask them. Yeah, so each nerve goes to a certain part of your organ. So the low back, the lumbar vertebrae, the sacrum, those all go closer to your reproductive organs as well as your excretory system. And so, I don't always say this is going to happen, but sometimes if you have constipation issues, even just adjusting in there, I've had some patients tell me that, you know what, I actually went and I can't believe it. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't say it cured it. Like, nothing cures anything, right? So just adjusting in there, it helps. And they're like, well, why? And I'm like, well, that nerve goes to that area and it's innervating it because it wasn't working for a while. Or you know what? Sometimes it could even be just a combination of things going in your digestive system. Maybe your large intestine isn't moving as properly as it should be. There's so many things.
That's really cool.
It's super cool. The more you learn about it, the more you're like, oh my God, like there's so much. Everything is connected.
Damn.
And everything has a purpose.
Yeah, that's one thing. It's like evolution doesn't have time for redundancy, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So so when you think about it, how is the messages going from your organs to your brain? They travel through the nerves. The nerves are the ones that are doing it. The nerve is connected to the spinal cord. Spinal cord goes all the way up to the brain. So it's a whole connection. It's not just one thing or the other.
Can you explain some other parts and what they do of
other
the
parts?
back? Yeah, I'm going to test you right now.
There's so many. There's so many. Like there's also, like you've also got cranial nerves, which are all over here. So the cranial nerve, I think it's the vagus nerve, that one that goes to your diaphragm. And so I've talked about this before on my blog. So if you're super stressed, you're not using your diaphragm. And usually that's kind of when that fight or flight response, right? And so you just kind of need to stimulate it a little bit because that's that nerve that goes all the way there, trying to tell your diaphragm, okay, you know what? We got to breathe a little bit better. It's so cool. Yeah. There's so much to it. And if you're super stressed out, you're always going to be in that fight or flight response.
Oh, that's the sympathetic, right?
Right. Parasympathetic is resting. And so, you don't want to be in that state all the time. You want to decrease it as much as you can. So pain is a big thing. Pain is always the last thing to show up, and it's the quickest one to leave whenever you're in any sort of condition as it is. So when you're in pain, you try to guard yourself. You're trying to be super protective, which is not making it any better because now your muscles are going in like this all the time, or your low back is you're just bent down all the time.
Damn.
I know there's so much
to it. It's just all connected.
It's all connected. I always say that. I'm like, it's always connected. Like there's no other way. That's just how our bodies are made. That's anybody in like animals, dogs, same thing.
Oh, I actually saw a horse get adjusted before.
Isn't it so cool?
Yeah, that's so weird. I had no idea.
It's so cool. There's dog chiropractors too. There's a few, I think, in the city, one or two of them, but you have to be more specialized to do animal chiropractic.
Like a specialization kind of thing. And how about
Yeah.
babies? Do you ever crack babies? Because I heard
You
it's
mean-
good if you have colic.
You mean adjust babies?
Yeah. What'd I say?
Crack.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Damn
that's okay.
it.
I actually don't adjust a
Um,
lot of babies. I do. We have someone else in our office who loves adjusting babies, and so she usually sees a lot of those. I have a few kids. The youngest kids, they're always so fun because we always call it popcorn when we adjust them, right? So when I adjust them, and I sometimes will use the activator, and they always call it the stapler. So I'll have like my youngest little patient, I think was 4 years old, and just so cute, you know. And they've got such little spines, and babies and kids are the easiest ones to adjust.
Just like less pressure, I guess. It just kind of.
Well, their muscles are so nice. They're nice and smooth.
Yeah.
They haven't had all the work that we've had to do
They've
growing
just
up.
been slammed with life.
Yeah, they haven't, right? So, and they bounce back a lot faster than we would. And so that's why when the older you get, if you leave things off for too long, the harder it is to recover.
Yeah.
And so I always, like, you know, people come in with, like I said, 30 years of pain. And if one visit isn't going to help, well, yeah, one visit isn't going to help. It's been 30 years. Like, nothing is going to work instantly. You can't go to the gym and expect to lose weight with just one time you go to work out. If that was the case, nobody would be doing anything. There
It's a
wouldn't.
lifestyle.
Yeah, and it is a lifestyle. So it's like you kind of have to, I feel like that's with any profession. You kind of have to just remind someone, you know, you can't just do one thing once and expect it to be okay. So when I have had patients say, oh, you know what, I've gone to a chiropractor before, it didn't help me. And I'm like, okay, how often did you go? Usually it's 1 or twice. I'm like, okay, well, how long did you have that pain that you were there for? Oh, I'd been there for years and years. And I'm like, well, 1 or 2 visits isn't going to help. And I'm like, I'm sorry if you thought that. Like, I apologize. But, you know, even here, I don't want you to be expecting that from me either, because 1 or 2 is not going to make it better. Yeah. And even for, like, myself, I sometimes do hurt myself quite a bit too. And so I sometimes have to get adjusted twice a week.
Damn. Yeah,
And I
because you're
work there.
always like bending over.
The more hard you are on your body, the more your body is going to need some tune-ups. And so patients are always surprised when they're like, oh, who's in Dr. Sani's room? And they're like, oh, Dr. Sani's getting adjusted. They're like, she gets adjusted?
She
Like,
practices what she preaches?
I was like, yeah, I have to. They're like, why? I'm like, well, I felt a rib go. Like, I could just feel it. It was just such sharp pain. They're like, that happens to you? I'm like, yes.
Yes, I'm a person too. Yeah.
Like, it happens to everybody. So I wish I had taken pictures because a few weeks ago I'd gotten pretty injured and my hip was really out. And when I mean out, it
Really?
wasn't very leveled. And so the doc at the time that was adjusting me said to me, it was so funny, and I'll always remember this. He's like, why aren't you lying down properly? I'm like, I am. And he's like, no, you're not. Like, put your hip down. And I'm like, it isn't. I'm like, it is down. It's normal to me. That's how it felt. And it was such a good eye opener for me to see that, you know, patients do come in and they think, oh, everything's fine.
But it's not.
Until someone looks at you and tells you, like, no, your shoulder's really low. Do you realize that you're walking with your one foot going out and the other one's the other way? Like, you know, and so when he said that to me, I was like, we should have taken pictures. Like,
It was that, like,
it was very off.
line,
And he was
wow.
just like, your hip is not touching the table. The other side is. And he's like, here, I'll show you what it looks like with your hip touching the table. So when he pushed on it to put it down, it felt so wrong. It didn't feel comfortable to me. I was like, no, that feels weird. I'm going to put it back to how it was. And he's like, fine, you're not touching the table.
holy.
And like, that wasn't one fix.
Yeah. How
And-
long did that take?
I'm still getting treated for it. So it's been probably about 2 months now at this point. And even for someone who does get adjusted a lot, there's just some things that do take time.
Mm-hmm.
Just like with anything.
I guess it's almost like a posture issue too. I
Mhm.
mean,
And I don't think it helps when I am also bent down, and I try to work on it too. I try to do my stretches. We have foam rollers in our offices too that we use. It hurts, but I do it. And the funny thing was that how this injury happened was through yoga.
well,
And I love yoga. And so I was at a yoga class and we were doing downward dog. I don't know if you're familiar with those poses.
that's where I hurt my knee at hot yoga, moto yoga.
Oh, no.
I love yoga, but it just fucked up my knee. I was doing Warrior 2 and I
Okay.
slipped on my back foot, and then like all my weight kind of like, and then it's just been, it's like sharp pain out of nowhere sometimes, but keep going on.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah. So I think it also depends on what kind of yoga teacher you have too. So the yoga teacher I have, she's so great. She went around the room fixing people's positions, you know, and they don't do it to make you feel bad, which I've heard patients say, oh, I just feel bad when they do it. I'm like, no, they're doing it so you're not hurting yourself. So when we were doing downward dog, and I swear to God, my hip made the weirdest sound, which is normal. Yeah, which is normal for me, which I know, you know, because I am always adjusting, right? So the two girls next to me both turned and looked at me. They're like, what was that? I'm like, oh, it was my hip. And they're like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And the next day I went to go see my doc, right? So I didn't want to wait too long. And I was like, you know what? I'll just ice it when I get home. I'll stretch it out. And it wasn't super painful. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, you know, simple things, even if you're not thinking, can put you out of alignment. It's very common. I mean, even if you see a pothole, we've got a lot of potholes here, right? And if you're walking and you're not looking, you put one step in and you're trying to get yourself back to normal again, right? And you'll get a sharp pain. It happens. It's everyday life, right?
I know. So, I just want to be perfect, though. I don't want any pain, but whatever.
But see, the more you take care of it, the easier it is to bounce back. That's the only thing. So if I wasn't getting adjusted myself regularly every week, I don't think my hip pain would be as mild as it is right now. I think it'd be super sharp.
Yeah, I know. And see, that's what I try to tell people. I'm like, you know, if people have back pain or some type of, like, I guess, osteo or like bone issue, for example, you know, you don't always have to go right to the doctor because, you know, like, not like the medical doctor, because I feel like a lot of people who maybe might have a negative perception on chiropractic might go straight there. But I've heard of so many terrible stories where, like, people get their like disc like dissected, and, you know, that leads worse pain down the road when you could have just, like, gotten adjusted. Like, I have a friend that, you know, had a really bad lower back pain, and then, you know, doctors were saying, you know, maybe surgery down the road, whatever, but he went to chiropractor and now he's feeling good. Now,
that's good, yeah.
So it's just like, you just got to explore your options before.
And I've noticed it's changed quite a bit because I've, some of the patients that are coming in now, I've noticed recently, in like the last 6 months or so, they're like, you know, I just want to get to the bottom of this and just do something because I've taken so much of this and so much of that, and it keeps coming back, and I just don't want to take time off work anymore. I'm so tired of taking time off work because of my back. I just want to do anything. And so, you know, they start exploring massage, physio, acupuncture, like everything, right? So I'm like, this is a great first step that you have decided to take. So I'm always like, well, I'm so glad you're here. Like, let's just figure out what's going on. And, you know, they're like, wow, you know, it did hurt the first week or so, and then, or even just the first couple of days, but they're like, you know, I've noticed a lot more improvement. And if you give them enough tools, which is what I like giving, is tools, so that you know what to do if something happens. So I always say, if it starts hurting right away, it's acute, definitely put ice on something.
Okay.
Ice is a lot better. It may not be comfortable, but it's a lot better, in my opinion, compared to heat at the beginning. At the beginning,
right? But then eventually, should you go to heat at the end? Okay.
I would switch to heat once you start, like, you know, maybe in like 4 or 5 days later.
Okay. Like once the pain's gone, like once the constant pain's gone, I guess.
Because at the acute time is usually when things will flame up. And if things are flaming, you're going to get more swelling.
More inflammation.
Right.
More heat.
Yeah.
Tense.
Yeah.
Stress.
Exactly. Stress, not sleeping.
Yeah. Damn. Oh.
Yeah, it's just a whole cycle.
Endless cycle. And you're here to break the cycle.
Well, let's hope we all can.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, I guess that's everything. All right.
Okay.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. First of many, I hope.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you're doing this. Yeah. This is so great.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time. Being the first doctor ever on the show. I'm so happy.
Good.
Yeah,
I'm happy to be here. It's my first podcast ever.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I did the radio. The radio thing was the first time I talked on, like, live, which was a little nerve-wracking. Yeah. And then after that, I did my first live video. I've never done that on Instagram.
Oh, yeah. I did that the other day. It's kind of... I don't even know what to do in that point. It
was a little nerve-wracking, and it was funny because everyone's like, well, I didn't feel like you were nervous. It was like, maybe it's just in our head, right? So we all think like that. But I did it with my friend Danielle that I was talking about earlier. We did it for the pregnancy series that we had started back earlier in the year. So we did a live, and I told her, you know what? Like, I just want to practice, like, public speaking and all of that. So I'm glad we're doing a podcast.
It's just, and that's what I realized, if you look at my first podcast, it's almost cringy. It's so cringy how many times I say and when I get excited, I'm like.
Right.
But it's just a skill, just like anything. You have to
keep doing it.
And then one day when we're on episode 100, and we'll just be like experts. But no, you just got to keep on practicing. But yeah.
No, you're doing great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, honestly. Okay, well, I guess that's a wrap then.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, bye.
Bye.